Council meeting of the 14th of December. As we've already done our karakia earlier this morning, this is just a mihi to you all for being here. As councillors, staff, guests and online, a very warm welcome. Tēnā koutou katoa. To start with, we will have apologies. So I have apologies from Neil Curtin. I'm happy to move that. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you. All those who agree say aye. Aye. Those against, carried. I'd also like to formally welcome Tanya Hopmans to the table today as the representative and co-chair of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council Regional Planning Committee. Tēnā koe, Tanya. And then I'd also like to call for notices, which I will start. And this is more a acknowledgement and congratulations to our Chief Executive Officer, James Palmer. So, hongai te paki ki ai. And why we're clapping is because he has taken an incredible role with the Ministry for the Environment as the Secretary and for the Chief Executive as well. So it's with great pleasure to share that news, James, but also a huge loss for the organisation. Your exceptional leadership will be missed, but we've had you for 5 years. And we know that you're destined for greater things. So it will be sad to lose you. You still have 2 months worth of hard work with us until your departure. But we just wish you all the best on that new evolving journey that we've hopefully been a part of. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Chair. I just very briefly just say thank you very much for the acknowledgement and all the support that I've had from you, governors, elected members, since the election, for those of you that have recently arrived and those of you that have been on this journey with me for a longer period of time. It has been an enormous privilege to lead this organisation. We've had an incredible period of growth in building the capability and capacity of the Regional Council over the last 5 years, and I've had the privilege of being backed by a group of elected members who have had great aspiration, vision, ambition, and who've been willing to back me and the staff of this organisation with significant increases in resources to do more on the ground with our communities to make a big difference. And so that doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't come along all that often in one's career. So I've had a real tailwind, and that tailwind has certainly contributed to the ability I had to put my hand up for this new role. So I've learned a lot along the way, and I'll be taking those learnings to the new role. So HBRC will be continuing to contribute to the National Environmental Management System. And so I'm very fortunate to have had that grounding. And it has been a grounding because it's been working at the coalface with our communities and with our people that work on the ground. Perhaps the final thing I'd just like to say really to the staff of our organisation, it is a privilege every day to come and work for the staff of this organisation, and they have given me an enormous amount of support both professionally and personally over my tenure. And so I'm incredibly grateful to them for helping me along on my journey. And I am sad to be going. There's still lots of work to do, which I will be supporting the organisation from afar. So thank you again for the acknowledgement today and for the journey we've been on. And I will be attending one more council meeting at the end of January when hopefully I'll be able to say a little bit more about what we've achieved over that time.
Yeah, I think it's a good time we can say some wicked and wonderful things about you then. Kia ora. Are there any other notices? There are not. Are there any conflict of interest declarations in today's public items? And there are not. Call for minor items not on the agenda. There are none. Well, we will head into our decision items. And I must just say, in terms of the paper itself, I found it very efficient, and obviously the strategic and governance team have set out our papers in a far more efficient way in terms of reading and less reading compared to last term. So a big thank you to the staff for that task. So I will hand it over to you, Susie, to run us through item 5, which is the 21-22 annual report and summary. Thank you, Susie.
And thank you, sorry, and I am going to pass over immediately to Chris Comer.
Go to Chris.
Hello again. Yes, so we're presenting here the 21-22. So earlier today we were talking about next year. This is about last year. And so this is the annual report for the 21-22 financial year, reporting against year 1 of the LTP, 21 to 31 into there. Take the paper as read. The key points in there is that we're getting an unmodified audit opinion. The delay, which we touched on earlier, that usually these reports would be due by the 31st of October to be finalised. Through the COVID years, we've had a 2-month extension onto them, which allows us up to the 31st of December, mainly related around audit shortages, audit staff shortages, to be able to complete all of the audits. On that point, this year we have had Ernst & Young in the first year of doing our audit, and we've got David Borry and online here to answer any questions or talk about their audit opinion of the accounts there. As I said, report comparing to the first year of the LTP, there were 3 prior period adjustments that we have made into the report. Those are probably the biggest item in item 14. Things around software as a service now being required to be expensed rather than capitalised, and making a prior period adjustment for that. And also we have just recently, which hasn't made it into this paper, had a change for our water calculator that we have been building up as being, through discussions with audit, having that as an rather than an intangible asset, having that expensed as well. In terms of both of those items, it doesn't change the cash flow or anything too much in terms of how we've paid for those ones. It just has an ongoing effect in terms of the depreciation that was going to be available for those and the total asset base of the organisation, but not a massive change there. There was also a new accounting standard around financial instruments, which has meant a few changes for how things are declared within the profit and loss side, and a presentation of non-controlling interests within our equity section, which had gone through the HBRIC accounts and then the flow-on effects into the group accounts for the council. Other than that, I think it's probably worthwhile handing over to Ernst & Young if they want to say their presentation. David, if you want to talk about your audit opinion.
Thanks, Chris. And just confirming everyone in the room can hear us clearly?
Yes.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. And Ahmed and I will be reasonably brief in talking to our report. I might just make a couple of initial comments on the executive summary, which is on page 3 of our report. And to start with, it's a bit of context around the process and also a thank you. So the first piece of this, I think, goes to what Chris has just run through, but this year's financial statement preparation and also the audit of those financial statements and the annual report has been a bit more challenging or involved than it would ordinarily be, and that's driven by a number of factors. One was we had a shorter lead-in period to the work because the previous annual report was adopted in May of this year. As an audit service provider, we were new to the council, and then there were also the particular items in the annual report that were of a unusual nature that Chris has run through, where there was one new accounting standard, a new interpretation of an accounting standard, and also the correction of how something has been presented in both the current period and previous periods. That being said, we've all got to the end of the process and got to the end of the process in a pretty constructive way. And a thank you would go to the management team at Council that have really supported us and helped us through that process, and it's very much appreciated from our side. In the bottom left of that executive summary page, there were 6 open items when we issued this report, and just wanted to take the opportunity to confirm that any items of substance have now been closed. So there were a couple of items that we were yet to test, and that work's been done, and there were no issues. So the only things that now remain from our perspectives are formalities to the signing and adoption of the annual report and representation letter, and final checks of the documentation for things like typos. The other point I might take the opportunity to make in that section is it mentions that we will issue an unmodified audit opinion with an emphasis of matter, and just wanted to briefly touch on that emphasis of matter. So the emphasis of matter that will be included in the audit opinion draws the reader's attention to the inherent uncertainties involved with measuring greenhouse gas emissions, and that's primarily because this is an area where the approach and methodology is still developing. The 2 other points I think that are really important in this space, one is that this is something that has been done consistently across the local authority sector. So all local authorities that have an emissions measure in their performance information will also have an emphasis of matter of this nature in the audit report. And the second point being that an emphasis of matter is in no way a qualification or modification to the audit opinion. We're still providing an opinion that says the annual report complies with NZ GAAP. It's just emphasising one particular matter that management have appropriately articulated within the document. Maybe the last point to touch on for me is probably in the top right of that page. There's a summary of the uncorrected audit differences, and really just to highlight that there are only 2 uncorrected audit differences, and they're very small in nature, so around the $100,000 quantum. Ahmed, I might just get you to touch on a couple of the areas of audit focus. So on the executive summary page, we've summarised our areas of audit focus, and Ahmed will just touch briefly on 2 of those to give a little bit more context.
Thanks, Steve. Good afternoon, everyone. I think I will start with page 4 of our report, which talks about infrastructure assets and property, plant and equipment. So infrastructure assets and property, plant and equipment form a large number on the balance sheet of the council. And therefore we focused more on those during the audit. Infrastructure assets and the property, plant and equipment are carried at fair values, and infrastructure assets were last revalued in 2020, and there were no revaluation this year. However, management has done some work to assess whether the value has moved since last valuation, and they come to the conclusion that it has not moved substantially. And we concur with that conclusion. In terms of property, plant and equipment, this is mainly land and building, and those have been revalued this year, and it's been revalued by an external valuer, and our focus has been checking the valuation report makes sense, but also testing the inputs to the valuations in terms of market prices and comparable sales and things like that. Through that process, we have not found any material issues with the valuation. And the other properties that have been revalued this year are the investment properties. So those are the rental properties in Napier and Wellington. Those have been revalued by external party, and our work has been similar and to the property valuation, where we've tested the inputs to the valuations and liaised with the valuer to understand what drove the valuation movements. The other area I just wanted to touch on is the performance reporting section. This is basically the other elements of the council's annual report that our audit opinion covers. And this year is the first year that the council basically is reporting against the long-term plan, and so the long-term plan of 2021 to 2031, and our focus have been really picking significant performance reporting measures and then verifying the calculations on the results that have been reported in the annual report. And through that process, we haven't identified any issues. However, we've provided some improvement points going forward to management, and those largely relate to how the information or the results are depicted or reported in the annual report, and they're quite minor. So those are the 2 areas I wanted to cover, but happy to take any questions the council may have.
Thank you very much. And just to acknowledge the team, including our auditors, in this complex and significant piece of work that you've produced for us. So we will go to questions. Councillor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. A question, very simple question, probably for Ahmed. Page 4 of your report, just above the table, sentence on my version at least is incomplete. You were trying to tell us something about valuation movements, but didn't quite get there. So while you're thinking about that one, maybe I can pose.
Area shown on the table.
So just missing a sentence.
Yeah, but I appreciate it's advice to us. I'd appreciate knowing what the advice is rather than having to guess.
Yep.
So my broader question is just an understanding of process around the audit. Am I right in understanding that you guys are phoning in from, or you're part of EY in Australia? Is that correct, or New Zealand? Sorry, I was under the impression that the audit was carried out in part from EY in Australia. Is that correct or not?
In short, no. So we're Wellington based, and we were up in the Hawke's Bay to complete the work with the team on site there. So we had 2 visits up to the Hawke's Bay, one for 2 weeks, which was prior to 30 June to do some setup work. And then our subsequent visit, we were up in the Hawke's Bay for 3 or 4 weeks with the team to round out our year-end work. And just to go back to your initial question, Ahmed, can you just cover the bottom part of that sentence we lost? So I think basically the table, thanks for the question. I think the table was just highlighting that we're recording the value at the year end, but also the movement in the period. Basically what we're trying to say there is the movement in the period largely relates to the council's head office at 59 Dalton Street, where the value has gone up because of the locality of the property.
Right, thank you, makes perfect sense. So the second part of my question, and obviously I've been misinformed about the involvement of EY in Australia. The other point I want to explore is the timing for subsequent years. We understand that due to COVID, there's been a number of constraints both on council side and on EY's side in terms of getting which has been accommodated by a national extension to the deadlines for the audit. We understand that we will go back next year to a 3-month time frame. Can you assure us that EY will be able to support that 3-month time frame for the audits next year?
So that's a really good point in terms of across the board for all public entities, that time frame shifting back to what it originally was, being the end of October. I think from our perspective, one of the things that's critical in terms of being able to meet that time frame is making sure that we get through a sufficient amount of work ahead of 30 June. So in short, it really comes down to the preparation work. And as part of closing out the audit we've just been through, one of the conversations that we had with your management team was around that. And so we've agreed to circle back with them in January of next year, really to have a conversation around what are the key pieces of work that we can do early ahead of 30 June that will then allow that deadline at the end of October to be met.
Thank you.
Thank you. James.
Thanks, Chair. Just a query about the determinations in relation to the computer models that we've built, which are, I guess, more data sets than anything, particularly the SkyTem and LiDAR data sets and the groundwater models that we've built. It did come as a surprise to management that they were not able to be treated as intangible assets, particularly on the basis that they are discrete items that could be transferred to other parties. The test seems to have related to a question as to whether or not they derive economic value, I think the wording which was used, which I assume was more related to financial value back to council. These models obviously deliver significant economic value to the region in similar ways to our stock banks and pump stations and our infrastructure that protects from flood events. And in many ways, they're more alienable as assets than those stock banks, etc., which by law we probably couldn't transfer to another party even if we wanted to. So they do derive economic value, if you like, in terms of being able to yield a direct financial return. To some extent, they inform other processes, such as consenting processes, which are partially cost recovered. So they do sit in the background of processes that derive some form of revenue for council, but it's not, we don't directly charge for the usage, even though we could have. So the bit that I guess I'm struggling with is that we have a range of assets, physical assets in particular, which are treated as assets for the balance sheet, from which we don't derive any direct revenue. They deliver broader economic value, and I'm just trying to understand what is the distinction about those, because they're quite different from software as a service, which we understand through the international financial reporting standards has shifted. These are assets which might involve a bunch of expenditure up front, let's call it capital investment, and then the benefit and utilisation of that asset extends over a number of financial years, could be a decade or more, particularly in terms of the survey of the groundwater conditions through the SkyTem survey. So presumably you've given some good thought to this, so just would be helpful to understand how you've arrived at your determinations. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things that helps answer that question, and apologies for the noise in the background, is around the different standards that are in play. So in terms of things like stock banks, that's PP&E and comes under the PP&E standard. The item that we're talking about here is an intangible asset, and that's a separate accounting standard. The main difference between those two is that the criteria to be able to capitalise intangible assets is more specific than PP&E, and there's 6 particular criteria that are required to be met, so it's more of a stringent target. And you're right that one of those 6 criteria that we've spent a reasonable amount of time working through with management is the piece around future economic benefit and the extent to which that is able to be quantified, I think is the key part. I don't think there's any question around future economic benefit. And to the extent that hurdle is not able to be met, it therefore means that those particular items are not able to be capitalised. I think the other lens to bring to this as well is how similar organisations treat similar costs. And by and large, if you were looking at other regional councils across New Zealand, they don't capitalise similar assets. So when you're thinking about things from a comparability perspective and being able to compare annual reports and financial information across the sector, I think that's an important consideration as well.
Those are some good points to raise, because it does impact on how we budget in the future, breaking capital and operational into that. So Susie, do you have a transitioning period for how that's going to happen for the organisation?
So from a net cash flow position initially to spend, it makes no difference, right? So we've still got the cash, whether it's OPEX or capital. What this will impact though going forward is previously we would have capitalised all these assets and we would account for the depreciation. So now what will happen is we don't have that depreciation cost, I guess. And so that will impact our reserves in due course, or our depreciation funds, but not materially. I don't believe it's material.
I guess the thing that we will have to do, and this is part of the reserves and insurance review that we're going to be carrying out, is have an assessment as to whether these types of assets we now need to actually have a set aside into a reserve ongoing each year to put aside stuff for replacement or development of those models in future. And so that would replace the depreciation that we would have been budgeting.
I think net overall, either way you do it, will result in a very minimal cash flow impact and cost.
The future.
Into the future.
Into the future.
Yeah, into the future.
Look, I would make the observation that when it comes to budgeting in the future, if we don't depreciate or create a reserve for replacement, to be more accurate, then you'll be in a situation where when you want to do something like this again, or it might be like in the case of SkyTem, some new technology where you want to develop a data set and you want to build a computer model off the back of it, that you will either need to fund that all in 1 year, and that could be a multi-million-dollar investment which would fall to general targeted rates and be very lumpy in terms of rating, or you would borrow for operating. And so this for me is raising questions about, I guess, our traditional view that you borrow for operating by exception and only on a very short-term basis as required in a transition to getting back to a balanced budget. This suggests to me that there are items that council, probably given their intergenerational value or multi-year value, you wouldn't want to put on any given group of ratepayers in any given 1 year. You would want to spread that cost. And since you can't now capitalise, you would probably want to borrow for that, but you would be borrowing without a balance sheet asset on the other side. So it does disturb the way in which we've thought about funding these assets historically, and I accept that the auditors are telling us that this is what the rules now require. But I think it may, in the medium term, start to have some impact on the way you think about perhaps even your investment appetite for biting off big chunks of intangible non-assets that council relies upon. Right, so look, I just say I'm disappointed by the interpretation. I don't think it's entirely sensible, but the rules are what the rules are.
Thank you. Any other questions for the team?
Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Harding and then Councillor Williams. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, again, this is really just for our team, just to make sure I've got my head around this. So we would have made, were it not for these, the way the managed funds has now been, the adverse variance is now reported, and the capital expenditure becoming operating expenditure, we would have been in a situation of about a $2 million deficit rather than we're a $15 million deficit versus a $7 million surplus, which is about $22 million difference. We would have only been a $2 million under what we projected without those things, right? So what I'm trying to get at is that despite all the financial headwinds we've had in the last year, we're about $2 million under the surplus that we thought we would have had, leaving aside those accounting vagaries. Is that fair?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. What I'm curious about is how the past translates to the future, so that, just so that I understand this, we would have, the reason that we're in that, what I'll call accounting deficit, or book deficit position, is because we have been squirreling money away into reserves, as well as now in a situation where things are being treated as operating rather than capital. What I'm not quite getting is if we can fix this for the future by the way we treat things and we don't put money into a depreciation reserve, couldn't we have done that with last year's accounts and take it back out again?
Do you want to talk about?
Have I asked a question that's even vaguely intelligible? Well, I mean, the solution that was put on the table for this, for next year, is that we don't, if this is to be treated as an operating expenditure, we won't need to raise more revenue because we won't be putting money into a depreciation reserve, which kind of offsets this issue, or offsets that expenditure. So why couldn't we do that for this year's accounts and just treat it in that way? Why did we get a double hit? Didn't make sense either.
Is there two questions? Is there two questions here?
Why isn't next year's solution this year's solution?
Partially because the reserve is set aside for depreciation and purposes. And in fact, we were looking to fund these items through debt funding anyway. They weren't being funded from the reserve, they're being debt funded. And that doesn't make a difference, if you like, to what happens on the P&L. That's just a perspective of how things are being, where the funding's, if you like, coming from, or which bit in the balance sheet is, if you like, funding it.
Right, okay.
Whereas for the P&L, it makes no difference.
Martin, are you seeking assurance that what was going to be set aside for depreciation for these assets will be put now into reserves? Is that the question?
No, I was just literally, I think I worked it out. Why is next year's solution not this year's solution?
Right.
We don't have to raise $17 million or $20 million that we didn't think we had to raise this year, next year, and it's all book entry. Why can't we resolve that in book entry way this year?
I'm still struggling with the question, actually.
Yeah, well, I'm all struggling with the concepts in here. Okay? And we've been hit with an audit opinion that's radically changed things, and you told us that we don't have a problem long term because of the way we treat our depreciation,
Yes.
as opposed to operating expenditure and the building up of reserves. So we can do that for the future. I just don't understand why we've been hit with this audit opinion. We couldn't treat this year's accounts in the same way.
I think what the issue here is that the stuff that we're talking about here in the audit opinion, that is about our non-cash changes that are changing, and our talk about our funding for going forward, and that is talking more about our cash position, our funding impact statement, and that. And so, really, the way that something is classified in here between an asset or in the operating expenditure from a non-cash perspective doesn't really impact on the funding impact statement as we're going forward, especially if we are already loan funding the purchase of that asset and then would be doing the depreciation over the next years to build up a reserve for the replacement of that. What we will do instead here is loan fund the initial creation of that model and then create a reserve from ratepayers' funds to
Now I think I've got it.
do a new one at the time.
Thank you for answering your question without me managing to pose it adequately.
Councillor Harding, concise question, please.
Thank you, Chair. So if I can draw the financial professionals' attention to page 64 of the full report, and there's an equivalent page in the short report. I want to test the validity of the high-level description of this year's outcome. So if you look at the top of page 64 of the full report, it says that the operating deficit, which we've just been talking about, essentially about 22 million behind where we expected, where we budgeted, primarily driven by fair value losses from investments and reduced revenue. And it's the and reduced revenue bit that I have a problem with, because as a high-level summation of the outcome, and from a lay interpretation, one then goes to, well, what was this reduced revenue? And then one follows through the report, well, actually our total operating revenue was $2.3 million higher than budget. So there's a logical disconnect, at least on the surface. And I've actually followed that through to page 69 as well of the full report. And if you go through to that and look at the detailed financial statements, the problem still exists. So I'm just testing whether it's fair and a reasonable representation at that very high level, which is at the, if anyone in the public absorbs this at all, that is the level they'll be looking at. Is that fair and reasonable?
So I'll answer this. When that was written and I'd finalised it, those two sentences or bits of the sentence were around the other way. This comment is about reduced revenue and fair value losses from investments. In a change that was being made at one time in the auditing, for readability, they were flicked around the other way. As soon as I noticed that they had done, I've said, no, they need to go back the other way because they were in that order for a specific reason, because it's reduced revenue in relation to the investments and fair value losses in relation to the investments. That is being changed at the moment.
Excellent, thank you.
Good question.
Good spotting.
Any other questions? So next steps then, Chris? So I see that's part of the paper.
Yep, part of the paper. Next steps are to formally adopt the financial statements, and then all the signatures, and that will be done onto the statements and the letters of representation.
Oh. Any questions about next steps? If not, we have recommendations 1 and 2 to receive the annual report summary, and to adopt the Hawke's Bay Regional Council 21-22 annual plan or annual report for publication.
Chair,
with those amendments.
I did have questions on other content to do with our activities, levels of service and outcomes and that sort of thing, but not to do with the financials. So I'm not sure if now is the opportunity to ask those questions. But
Sure.
it wasn't really to do so much with the financials. I had other questions.
Yep.
Is that right? If we look at I'll see if I can make them more intelligible. And I apologise for the question earlier, but we are being told that we've suddenly made a very significant deficit, and you can understand us being concerned about tight, with a lot of pressure on ratepayers to ensure that we're not in some sort of trouble for next year. Okay. So the more community outcome based questions I had.
Which page?
I'm on page, I just found it, it's on page 24.
Short report or full report?
Full report.
That's 25 swipes up and 4 swipes down.
Community outcomes.
Yeah, but this was a question that arose at all governors the other day, and I just really want to understand the position here in that, in terms of what we're funding and what we're able to fund and what we're not able to fund. And it talks about the Regional Council needing to having an understanding of the resourcing requirements and capacity of Mana Whenua to be involved in our planning process, particularly around Kotahi. And this needs to be a priority for the organisation over the next 6 months so that contracts can be put in place. Now, could I just get a little bit more, I guess, if someone could unpack that paragraph on the right-hand column on page 24 for me and paint a picture of what the solution's likely to be around the issue of do we have funding within our long-term plan to support our Mana Whenua partners in the engagement process.
James, that's probably best for you to answer.
Sorry, can you just, page 24 of the main report, of the main annual report?
Yep, community outcomes.
Right-hand column.
Right-hand column.
Sorry, I was on a different page. And your question really is, have we got sufficient funding in the LTP to provide for the, I guess, to give effect to the 2025. So the short answer is that we have funding. Its sufficiency still remains to be determined, and that's part of the iterative dialogue that we have currently with our PSGs through the All Governors approach, and the funding that we've put on the table that we've also been working through bilaterally with PSG groups. At the moment, there is a quantum. It will really be over to, I guess, the response we get from the PSGs as to whether or not that's going to be adequate. We've got a best guess, and we've got what I think is a respectable sum of resourcing to achieve this outcome. but it's a little bit of building the plane while flying it. And the Hawke experience was, I guess, our toe in the water in terms of attempting a partnership process to develop the freshwater values part of the change to the RRMP through Kotahi. So, I think yes, we've got a reasonable resource to achieve this, but it may need some supplementation in the upcoming long-term plan. If the feedback we get from mana whenua is that it is insufficient.
Actually, my next question is, the Mātauranga indicators is considered off track. I'm just wondering what were the factors that led to that assessment in terms of those indicators not being where we would hope that they are.
Look, I guess to some extent it's the early days state that we're in with respect to the Kotahi journey. Peary's team, as part of the long-term plan, Council signed off an investment for the Māori Partnerships Group to develop Mātauranga specialists to enable us to fulfil the target here. And the progress we've been making on Kotahi has been such that the emphasis of initial resourcing has been on relationship management. That has been prioritised by our Te Pau Whakarai and the executive team. We're now at a place where the relationship platform has been built, and the Mātauranga resourcing has now been brought forward. And in the coming year, the current financial year we're in and into the new calendar year, we anticipate accelerating the focus there. So we anticipate that we will catch up and we will achieve this in time, but at the point that the end of the financial year was completed for the annual report, we were off track.
Didn't feel you didn't feel we were where we should have been, bearing in mind that it's a 2025 target. Is that the point?
Well, at that point, we had no resource in play. We had an intention to go there. That situation has subsequently turned around. It was in the process of being turned around as we speak. Betty, is there anything you want to supplement?
No, I think this is also working in tandem with Kotahi as one of the major objectives for capturing this information. Mm-hmm. So we're a wee bit in behind in terms of both Kotahi and where we wanted to be and where we currently are. So the Mātauranga role is one that we're sort of actively pursuing at the moment to get someone into the role that can assist us in that part of Kotahi.
Yes, but it does strike me as a huge opportunity for Kotahi, and we've still got 3 years to go, so don't despair. Now, the converse question I've got, Chair, and there's two more, is on what basis do we consider we are on track on page 34 for planning urban development that avoids highly productive land? What in that statement suggests to us that we're on track for that?
So we don't have Katrina with us, but we have got Gavin, so he may be able to supplement comment from me. I guess the fact that we had a national policy statement in development, I don't think it was gazetted at the end of the financial year. I think it's been just subsequent to that from memory. That obviously accelerates our ability in a regulatory sense to protect highly productive land, and the translation of HBUDS, the Urban Development Strategy, into the Future Development Strategy under the MPSUD is an additional instrument which I think is probably giving us a sense that the pieces of the jigsaw are all coming together to protect highly productive land. I guess the date in there is from 2020.
Yeah, what have we done since 2020 to protect highly productive land as a council?
Well, as a council, we haven't been able to reflect anything into the Regional Resource Management Plan, as you know. The primary mechanisms for managing this do sit in the district plan, and the processes that are running around that are to some extent working towards the objective. I think, the statutory advocacy work that we're doing on that is probably as much within our current toolkit as we can achieve, and that has been being undertaken with some effect, which is the commentary that sits in there. But look, I think when we look at the measure, or the target, we probably do need to ask ourselves what we mean by avoids. Is it avoiding on every hectare, everywhere, on every occasion, or is it a more generalised statement? And I appreciate that's probably somewhat ambiguous in how the target is worded.
Yeah, I guess I'm just sitting behind the fact that HPUD has basically been inoperative. It hasn't been reviewed in 2021 like it's supposed to be, and we've been working towards a spatial plan. We're about to start a future development strategies. That's where my question's coming from.
Yeah.
We have been in a bit of a hiatus. Final question, Chair. I just challenge partially achieved on page 61 for transport, when it says that the performance measure is that we will have adopted a regional land transport plan, a regional public transport plan, and a regional cycling plan will be in place, and they all are. We've done all of those things. So why is it only partially achieved?
Timing-wise, were they all achieved by 30 June?
I see. So it's simply the fact that the RLPP was placed in September.
Just like, that's right.
So, Councillor Sears.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So looking at the land and water outcomes, and particularly highly erodible land is under tree cover, that we're off track. By 2050, 50% less contaminants from urban and rural environments into receiving water bodies. That's off track. Probably of most interest to our community is the biodiversity outcomes, both off track. So I don't think that there's any misunderstanding as to why these problems exist or why we're not making the progress we would like to. We know there's certainly issues around funding, capability. We know there's literally not enough trees available. So we understand that whole picture, and bring us back to sort of first principles of regional council around our protecting and enhancing the environment. Primary focus probably for most of our community, considering the work that we do or should be doing. So again, it's to the 30th of June, and we can look and follow around, I think, State of the Environment monthly reporting, so we can be looking at that. So I'm interested to know how are we going to reassess our objectives or outcomes, what's going to be possible, when is going to be the time for the community to look at what can reasonably be achieved, or in the terms of biodiversity, what must be achieved to stop the continuing decline. So I'm really trying to get a sense of, we know this is 6 months old, has the next 6 months given us something particularly different, or when is the time the council and the community, if that's appropriate, will be able to reset some of these measures? Because if you run through the report, almost all the reds are probably in the areas that our community would think us our most important work.
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. When these long-term plan targets and measures were adopted, which are largely a modification or evolution of those that were in the previous long-term plan, the council of the day asked for council officers to develop ambitious targets that would be stretch objectives for council, but also ones which to a large extent reflect what our core statutory responsibility is to achieve for the region. And what we are saying in each of those where they are off track is that the current program of work, including the quantum of resourcing, to some extent because of the constraints that Councillor Sears has referred to around things like the availability of poplar poles and workforce, etc., but probably more candidly in relation to the overall level of funding and resourcing for these areas, is well short of resolving these big wicked problems in the sorts of timeframes that we have set out. So the opportunity with the next long-term plan is to revisit those. And I think the opportunity for this council is to have an honest conversation with the community about the fact that the level of resourcing that this organisation has does fall short of that which would be necessary for us to have our freshwater, our biodiversity in particular, and our soil conservation in the state that we would wish it to be as a region. So there needs to be a conversation about regional willingness to pay, to fund, and the timeframes that the community has. What we do lack in most of these areas are firm policy and regulatory targets that the council has a legal obligation to work to. That will change through the freshwater plan change of Kotahi in particular, where council will have to set hard numeric numbers and targets around improving freshwater quality, which will lead backwards onto the land in terms of a whole bunch of interventions. And council will then be faced with how it essentially delivers a statutory plan with long-term plan resourcing in behind. And that's the important conversation that happens alongside Kotahi, which is the achievability and the fundability. But then after that will be the community conversation about, now that we've set these ambitious timeframes and limits, how are we going to get there? So that all lies ahead.
So just to clarify, through you, Madam Chair, Kotahi will be the place where we'll unpack this, reset it alongside, as you say, the freshwater objectives, which lead back to it, and reevaluate what can be achieved over a time frame or what can be accelerated with the resources and or funding.
The answer to that in simple terms is yes. The nuance and all of that, which council will need to work through, particularly with the Regional Planning Committee, is how much of that burden falls to individuals and are achieved through the hard stick of regulation, and how much is achieved by others through voluntary effort, and how much is achieved directly with the funding and support of the Regional Council. And optimising that mix is the key consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Foley.
Oh, just a follow-up question to that highly erodible land, and you might be the best to answer this, but the measure using against the target is the erosion control scheme, but there will be other plantings going on, people just getting on doing their own thing, forestry natives and things like that. So is that just not there, or is it just not significant, do you think? Or
Through you, Chair, you're right, Councillor, that that's a reflection of our work, but it doesn't reflect the broader initiatives that we know farmers are taking on farm now on their own. The other comment I'd probably make around this particular piece of work is, Councillor, you're dead right in terms of talking more about the outcomes that our community want. What we're reporting here are our outputs. So what are we practically and actually doing? Sitting in behind here, which we're unable to report on yet, but at some point in time we will, is starting to describe the water quality outcomes we're achieving through this. So we've got real-time monitoring that we've had set up for a number of years now. At a point in time, we'll have enough data to start drawing linkages between what we're doing on the land and what we're seeing in water. And the other thing that we're very keen to do in the development of the long plan from a biodiversity perspective is to bring to you a proposition to start outcome monitoring of our biodiversity. So yes, we can tell you a lot about, again, what we're doing in catchments, the outputs, but what people really want to know is, okay, what difference is that making?
Yeah, thank you.
Tanya.
Kia ora. Just going back to the community outcomes around by 2025 tangata whenua values for all catchments are identified and embedded in the Regional Resource Management Plan. And I see there we've got that we're on track. But when I read the description, and I agree with a lot of the description as to how we're going, I wouldn't say we're on track. I would say we're off track. And I just think we need to be straight about that, because what my concern is that we have 2 years before we need to notify. I'm expecting that if we went all out and got tangata whenua values documented and presented by tangata whenua during the course of next year, presumably there's going to be a year where we get into actual planning and debating around actual terms for the plan, for the Kotahi plan. But if we don't have tangata whenua values sorted next year, I'm only making up what the timeframes might be because I don't have a detailed outline of what our desired timeframes are to get certain bits of information and to be able to feed into the plan. So I don't want us to be thinking that we're on track because I don't think we are on track.
Through you, Chair, so the timetable is absolutely ambitious. The current work program, which has been put forward, which maybe has not been explicitly enough explained to the All Governors Forum, has the detailed policy and rules being developed in parallel through next year, and that we were expecting effectively catchment by catchment and chapter to chapter, which is the issues and options piece, to be coming through to the RPC at various points next year. And so alongside the vision and values, and we would be seeking to bring all that together for decision making in the the end of the third and fourth quarter of next calendar year, ready to go out to the community in 2024. So there has been a significant mobilisation of council resources to do this work, and this is the existential question for Kotahi really, is whether or not, to what extent we're going to need to wānanga our way through the detail of all of that before we can get to decision points, and how much discussion and debate each of those decision points is going to take. It is very, very hard for the planning team to estimate that, but it is incredibly challenging, and the timetable, the statutory timetable, puts a great emphasis on the decision makers to make decisions at pace in the absence of perfect information, with broad judgment and discretion exercised on a at breakneck speed, and that is the challenge that I guess we confront. One, because of the time frame in the National Policy Statement, but two, because as a regional council and as a country, we're several decades behind the job in managing what is something of a crisis in much of our freshwater quality and quantity management.
I suppose the concern I've got is that we know we've got values from Tank. We know that Mohaka whānau are working on their values, but we've got Tātou, we've got Maunga Haruru Tangi too, we've got Mana Ahuriri. I'm not sure how much of Hiniuru, Ruapani, Tūwhare Toa is outside the Mohaka part of the plan, but there's a lot of work to be done by a lot of groups in my view. So yeah, I just want to flag that, and I do think they need to know those detailed dates, because that's actually quite a wake-up call as to, we're going to be talking about our issues at this point. How prepared are we going to be to talk about our issues? And what we don't want is some sort of stymie where they're not prepared to talk about the issues. Yeah, so I don't think the green should be green.
It's optimistic.
Is it a true reflection though?
It's a reflection of the timetable that has been built and the resourcing which has been allocated to support it. The unknowable part for, I guess, council officers is the pace and rate at which the governors in this process will be able to make decisions, or be willing to make decisions.
Piri? Any other questions?
Just a final summary comment, really. I'd just like to note, Susie and the team, it's a big effort putting something like this together. So well done on that, putting the annual report together, I mean. One comment I would like to make in a general sense is, my view, annual reports should be forward-looking too, and I don't get a sense, particularly in the Chair and CEO letter, that of the big stuff we've got to knock over in the next 1 and 2 years in particular. And I think as a reader and getting an understanding of the business, it's good to know those things that are on the horizon that we've got to be able to achieve.
Thank you, Jock.
Happy to move. Oh, sorry, Thompson.
Just quickly,
through you, Madam Chair. James, I just noticed, picking up on what Tanya's referring to, perhaps I'm just mindful of what type of measurement tool is being used to measure that on track, off track when it comes to some of that Aotearoa Māori stuff and the contribution into that space. And if there is one, or is there one in development now to measure?
So we don't have a tool at the moment. This is a subjective assessment, but the very first task, if you like, is to build a framework in which we understand how we bring Mātauranga across the region into council's planning, policy, decision-making processes, and that will enable us to start thinking about measures of success here. But it's obviously a massive question. The extent of Mātauranga that exists across the Rohi is vast. How that gets incorporated into the work of council is a big open-ended question at this point in time. So I couldn't say we have any confidence that we have any sort of precise measure at this point in time, but it will be important for us to develop that as a priority.
Councillor Foley.
Yeah, happy to move the recommendations, Chair 1 and 2, receive and note the annual report and adopt the annual report for publication.
Thank you. And I've got a second to Councillor Williams. All of those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you very much. We move on to our next item, and we are, apologies, running a little off timing. But we have the recommendations for the working group, the possum working group. Oh no,
Oh, sorry.
Biosecurity working.
biosecurity. Oh no, you were just saying thank you. Oh, sorry. I was like, have I missed something? The biosecurity working group.
Yeah, just on that as a point for future reference, an annual report, it's 160 pages long. It's an entire account of this year's work effort and financial situation. To give it half an hour and to, for us not to be able to drill down and tease things out, ask hard questions, I think means we're not doing our job. So could we please give that an hour next year?
Noted.
Seriously?
And normally, Chair, that would come through the Corporate and Strategic Committee first for proper interrogation debate.
Yeah. Like we said, we've fallen on an election year, so it's all a bit out. And I didn't mean to stop robust discussion.
Staff that put thousands of hours into preparation.
But very much acknowledged. Ian, before Ian, actually, Councillor Foley is the chair of this working group.
Yeah, look, I'm happy to introduce the paper and welcome the staff here, Lauren and Mark, and Ian, responsible for this program, and just introduce the paper to particularly to our new councillors that have been involved along this process since the start. So I guess to give you a bit of background, as part of the council 3 years ago, there was certainly feedback brewing that various councillors brought back to this table that there was concerns around the PCA program. People were seeing more possums. Actually, to go back a step, the PCA program's been running for since the early 2000s, and huge success story really when it started. And, the observations were that possums just weren't around anymore. And so when people started seeing them, we certainly started getting feedback as councillors and brought that back to the table. So you'll see there in the steps outlined 12th of May 2021, which was when we formally set in motion this plan and got the Biosecurity Working Party together with those members listed in the paper, and then went through the process of council coming back with a proposal and taking that out for public consultation. And there's pretty high level summary there the results of that. Further details been in your notes previously. And we met just on the second, actually we met just prior to the end of last term, and then once again last week to finalise the process and bring these recommendations to you today, which are basically to move from the PCA program and transition across to a contractor model. So the PCA program is largely, I guess, it's the farmer's responsibility, so the farmers can either do the work themselves or employ a contractor of their choice, whereas this proposal is taking it to a full contractor model, and that's simply because based on data, particularly around the bait, which is subsidised through the HBRC scheme, we can see kind of the volume used and the amount of the possum control being undertaken, which has been slipping back, through the years, hence why we've seen the possums return. The council and then the Biosecurity Working Party at the time decided that the reason to undertake this kind of change was driven by a biodiversity benefit. So that was a very big part of the strategy of the council last term, and so that's been the mandate for the change. Happy to take questions, and the staff are here who have been working on this pretty diligently and thoroughly to get us to this point. So thanks to the staff to get us to this point.
Thanks, Councillor Foley. Ian, anything else to add?
Thank you, Chair. And look, just in case you don't know, so Mark Mitchell's a principal advisor on our new catchment operations team, and Lauren's the project manager who's helped hold this together, and Mark has led it. Appreciate that they haven't been in front of you before. Look, just kind of a real simple context for me. When I took on the biosecurity functions of the council a number of years ago, I was immediately approached by landowners and contractors about concerns with the possum control program and its effectiveness. I then got somebody at arm's length to come in and review a range of our biosecurity programs at arm's length, an expert from Waikato. One of the key things he focused on was the significant risks of our possum control program, and coincidentally at the same time, but unrelated to our work, there was a significant TB outbreak in the region. And just to be really clear, we're not the vector manager for TB, so it's not our responsibility to manage TB. That's entirely the work of Osprey. But what it really signalled to me is that the combination of his advice and the way the program was working signalled quite a significant risk in us as council for our biodiversity ambitions, because possums are one of the most significant biodiversity threats for the region, and they're pretty ubiquitous. They're pretty much everywhere. So, we've worked over the last 18 months to kind of bring all of this together to you. And what this sets up is the ability for council to take on that contract management of possums across the region. What it hasn't done is set out exactly how that would happen, but it provides that opportunity for it to occur. And that's a really fundamentally important point, because what would need to happen in the development of the long-term plan is that we would bring back to you advice on how that could occur, how we would operationalise that. And it's not the sort of thing we'll start up quickly in 1 year, go from not doing it to doing it. It's something we would build over time to setting ourselves up to deliver effectively. And I guess the other advantage of that is that council bringing that on and running it allows us to kind of take a landscape scale and sort of strategic approach to managing this pest. Had a really interesting conversation with some DOC leadership this morning, and they're right now sitting on quite a significant opportunity for this region for broader pest management that this sort of work could integrate into and provide sort of those landscape scale solutions. So it's providing us with options and opportunities we wouldn't have or haven't had in the past, which serendipitously right now are actually probably going to be quite useful. And, look, as the paper sets out, if we did nothing else as a council to support our biodiversity ambitions, but look to get on top of the possum issue, it would be the number one thing we would advise you as staff to focus on and do well. And, you know, signalling that if we're successful in getting this across the line and through the policy process, I'd like to bring back to you in the long-term plan discussions a proposition to think ambitiously and talk about possum eradication across this region, not just possum suppression. So a step change in the way we would do it. So that's all from me. And look, as Will said, we're very happy to answer any questions about the paper.
Thanks, Ian. And thank you, Mark and Lauren, for also being a part of this robust piece of work with the working group. So thank you very much. Are there any questions for the team up here? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to be a pain today, but I do have a couple of questions. There's a reference to an Appendix 4 as an example of how property rates could change under current rating modelling using the managed contractor approach. I don't think we've got that. Are you able to paint a picture of what that appendix would tell me if I was able to read it?
Yes.
Or is it a really long report?
No, it's quite a short report, and it's just an example only based on different properties and rateable values. So apologies if this wasn't sent out in your data pack, but what I can do is I can send it through via governance, perhaps. Am I able to send through an attachment now, or is it after the fact?
Pretty hard to explain.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing it before voting on this matter, to be honest.
It is actually not paid.
Yeah, I think it's a separate thing.
I couldn't find it.
Is it the BP? This one?
It is there. Okay, that's great. So I couldn't find it, and I asked the governance team for it, and it was there. Okay, the next question is, there is this suggestion of a hybrid model, and maybe Councillor can take speak. But what I want to understand are, I guess, the practical implications that would be involved in any different cost implications of contractors only going to places where existing landowners didn't wish to carry on. In other words, just tell me, paint a picture of what that might or might not look like. If some landowners said, look, I'm happy to carry on doing my stuff and look after my property, and other property owners would go with the contract approach. Yeah, I just wouldn't mind understanding a little bit more about that.
Mark or Ian?
Yeah, sure. I think it'd be a very complex model. So the current model is exactly that. They do their own control, and we try and monitor as much of the region as possible to find out whether they have indeed been doing it or not. The main issue I see with having the hybrid model is I think a number of people would stick their hands up to say they'll take the rates relief and continue doing possums themselves, whether they were actually doing possum control or not. We then would have to go and monitor and audit those properties, which is effectively the same program we have now. So it is a challenging space to be in, because there are landowners out there who are doing a good job. So it is tough. Just having a hybrid model, though, is very challenging in delivering that and not ending up with a very costly auditing process in behind that.
Councillor Preps, if I could just add to that, agree with Mark's comments. I guess the question centres around this notion, and certainly the fact that many people are doing their own work and they're very passionate about it. I've had a number of recent conversations with farming leadership in the region, an idea that you know, there are a number of solutions, but an idea that we're sort of batting around at the moment is to kind of have a conversation that goes along the lines of, look, we've got possums and we'll do that at scale across the region. We have an ambition to be predator-free in this region in our long-term plan. How can we support and resource you to pick up other pests that we're not currently focused on, mustelids, rats, those sorts of things. So harness that passion and interest in broader pest management and say, well, we'll do one part of it and we're going to support you to do other parts that we're currently not doing, and hopefully that then sees a snowballing of that activity broadly within a catchment.
All right, I'm sure Councillor Van Beek.
Yeah, Councillor Van Beek.
I just wanted to ask the question. I guess the second question is, before we get to that, can we even go with it if it wasn't recommended? There's something in the paper that says we either adopt the recommendation or we have to go back through a hearing process. Is it within our power to adopt the hybrid model if we decided to?
James?
No,
Or
if you don't accept the recommendations of the working party, the current policy stands. You'd have to redevelop the policy and go and reconsult in the manner we've just done. So you couldn't make it up on the hoof.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Van Beek?
Yeah, I don't really want to have this discussion, but we're having it now. I've been from day one, once I listened to those who brought their submissions, especially those in person, and we had a contractor sitting here right through the whole day listening to us. So we actually, as a staff and as a biosecurity working party, we actually haven't even looked at a hybrid model. We actually haven't had an honest discussion with those people who came to us, willing to have a discussion about how can we make it work so that we as landowners who are able to do a very good job when it comes to controlling possums versus those who don't do their work very well. And to be honest, and I've got to say it, I think because of we as a council actually have failed our landowners, keeping them to task, that now we're in a situation that we're actually going to rate right across the landowners for them to pay and do possum control. So I mentioned several times that I was interested in a hybrid model, and we never really sat down with, say, a group of landowners who are actually very good at possum control and are passionate about possum control as what that hybrid model may look like. So we actually haven't had the discussion. And I don't think now is the time for me to spell out what I think it would look like, because I believe that it would be quite simple for landowners to prove by invoicing, by their trap lines, that they actually are doing a good job and therefore should be able to get rate relief. Definitely, those landowners who are doing a good job really feel the need for others who actually haven't got the skills, haven't got time, or the notion to control possums, that us as a council should go there and actually eradicate possums on their properties, and they should be rated accordingly. Honestly, to me, this is a very quick solution that we actually haven't looked at all the options. That's the way I see it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Foley, would you like to respond, particularly around lack of opportunity?
Yeah, I guess, Councillor Van Beek's focusing on some of the submitters that participated in that process, but, the flip side of that is the submitters that, were adamant that we must do this. And, from a biodiversity point of view, from a TB point of view, I know farmers that have been hit with TB and contacted me as soon as this process got underway and said, don't you do anything but go to the contractor model, because that, protects our businesses and going to get all those other benefits that you've talking about. So, one of the things around consulting is you do consider all the feedback that you get from the public, but in this case we did get the majority that submitted in support of it. So, while I applaud Councillor Van Beek for taking note of those particular submissions, I can't ignore the fact that the majority were for the proposal.
Kia ora. Councillor Van Beek?
Can I have an explanation of someone around the table here what hybrid means?
Ian?
You don't have to answer it because you know exactly what I mean.
Well,
Sorry, as stated in the paper.
It's an unfair question
Yeah.
because, the hybrid model hasn't been defined.
Yeah.
Could be many things to many people.
No, hybrid. So Councillor Foley is saying that those who've been hit by TB, they want to go for the contractor model. I'm not saying that we shouldn't. we should go for the contract model where we have areas that that landowners, A, don't want to do it, or are incapable of doing it. So that's where we would go for a contractor model, and those who actually are capable. And the way I've explained it is, if everybody's against Putin, anyone who's got a gun should go and point it at the guy and shoot him, or his army. What we're actually doing here, those who've actually got guns get taken off them, and they're doing a very good job. Take it off them, and now we're actually going to get contractors go on their land and do the job for them, and they're passionate about it. Why not use them? The way, and at the same time they get a rate relief. That's the way I see it.
So, Ian.
Chair, perhaps, look, I absolutely accept all those points. Perhaps the really key part to this, or point to that, was the comment I made at the start, is that what this will do is it sets up the policy framework to say, should council choose to take a contractor model, the policy now supports that. You can do that, okay? We haven't worked out from an operational perspective exactly what that looks like. That's how, we will come back to you in the long-term plan on how we would operationalise that policy. And it's entirely conceivable that there could be a model that has, varying and different approaches that factors in those sorts of issues. And those are the sorts of things we would look to build to. I guess as Mark has said, from a practical, pragmatic, operational perspective, the most effective way for us to do it is we do it at scale across landscapes. It's not to say we couldn't adopt a model that had various farms in the middle of others doing it themselves. It's just that would cost a bit more.
Okay, I'll go down this way. I'll go Councillor Harding, then Councillor Sears, then Councillor McIntosh. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So in the interests of maybe finding a short circuit to this, I'd like to ask staff through the Chair, if I could, to explain how the exemptions under Section 87 of the Biosecurity might act in practice. And the point of this is, can we have a local, does the recommendation as it stands give us the ability to control that, so we can actually design a hybrid model through actually the operation of those exemptions ourselves, rather than having to go to the minister? Because as I read the Biosecurity Act, it only talks about the minister being able to grant those exemptions. Thank you.
Mark.
Well, that's a good question. It's my understanding that we do have the ability to grant exemptions, and that does not have to go to the minister for sign-off, but I would have to double check on that. But the model that we've laid out today, if we were to go ahead, we can still explore a hybrid model. I just want to be really cautious in that it may be quite a complex model to deliver, and I don't want to set expectations. The other one is we have to sort of move this through heading towards a long-term plan as well. So, and working through rates relief and all those sorts of things and how that will work as well. So I guess the short answer is yes, we can still explore a hybrid model, and we do have the ability to provide exemptions.
So can I just clarify my position then? So I have independently arrived at the same position, or essentially the same position as Councillor Van Beek for a very similar kind of process or logic, and my independent view is that there is some confounding of issues within here that we haven't managed to separate out between business protection, to borrow Councillor Foley's phrasing before from a rural landowner's point of view around TB, the role of Osprey, and biodiversity outcomes. And look, but the start point for all this is it's a fantastic idea to focus on possums from a biodiversity point of view. Absolutely, it's a no-brainer, right? The question is how we get there, and how we get there whilst preserving goodwill and the good work that goes on in the community. And where I land on all this is, if it's possible to go ahead with this space, if we can have certainty that the exemption that's been proposed, that we can actually operate so as to provide a practical, flexible opportunity for either individual landowners subject to order and that sort of thing, or my other straw person model, which is around catchment groups who already operate in the biodiversity space and have a more have a broader view, a more holistic view on targeting a range of pests for a range of outcomes around, broader than just, possums and TB, and that's an option. So if I could be confident that we could support this today, but I'm not sure we can because what you've told us so far is it's not absolutely clear.
Yeah, so Hawke's Bay Regional Council is the management agency for the Regional Pest Management Plan, so we would be able to go through the process of granting exemptions. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Sears, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I have a few questions as well. I sort of just want to go back a little bit to understand the drivers. Maybe I'm asking you, Ian. I'd like to understand the process by which you've been monitoring farmers over the last couple of years and what the numbers have shown, how we know this increase has happened outside anecdotal that we read in the paper.
Sure, and look, great question. So just reiterating that in recent time, when we restructured ELT responsibilities, I picked up biosecurity functions as part of that. So, and immediately I was approached by contractors and farmers to say, you've got a problem with the way possums are being managed in the region. And about the same time, like I say, there was quite a significant TB outbreak. And and I'm not linking the two, and I think we need to be really clear that this is not about us being the vector manager. So I got somebody independently to look at how we were operating our possum control area program, independent of staff, independent of council, who has a lot of experience to say, tell me what's working and what's not, and what are the risks. And he independently came back and said, you've got risks with the way your possum control area program is being operated, and you have risks in the way it's being monitored, because you're monitoring, the way the monitoring is set up and designed and the way that we're sort of delivering that, risks us missing significant hotspot areas across the region. So it has a random kind of selection or an area of places that you go to assess possum numbers. It has an ability for landowners to kind of pass or fail based on number of lines over a certain count, a number of lines under. So it was, without getting into a whole lot of technical detail, there was statistically significant risks. That was point number one. So actually, your monitoring is not particularly effective. So the monitoring information was telling us we were below our RTC, our residual trap catch data. But what he was saying is you shouldn't believe that information because you're not accurately collecting the data. Okay. What we have done is we've significantly beefed up. Again, when I inherited the program, funding for that area of business had been eroded away in deference to other areas. I've flipped that to significantly scale it up to get more monitoring, to understand what is actually happening, also to figure out where are the landowners who are not doing their jobs. The other part of it that I guess is a fundamental and a principal part of the kind of, or philosophical part of the discussion is council has currently an obligation to do enforcement, compliance checking and enforcement of the PCA work. Who is not doing their share, and then to take action to ensure that they are. And again, we weren't resourcing it and we weren't focusing on it because we didn't have the resources to do it. So we weren't following up. And that's really kind of one of the fundamental questions here that we're going to have to consider going forward is, are we going to take a role as more an enforcement agency around biosecurity to sort of say, well, actually we're going to carry a stick more and monitor and audit and start hitting people that are not doing their thing? Or are we going to look to be more the kind of facilitator and the leader of broader community outcomes in achieving those without necessarily carrying the stick?
Well, I'd say putting everyone under possum control is a big stick, but okay. If you put the new monitoring in, the results of your new monitoring, did it show increase in possum numbers?
I'm not sure actually whether...
Yeah, I don't have the figures on me, but we had certainly an increase in, that was presented either to the Biosecurity Working Party or a previous council paper, but we had an increase in properties that were failing because we were looking at capturing more people.
So the overall numbers across the region were increasing, or were these small areas? Because what I don't see in the papers is actually evidence of the problem. That's really what I'm trying to find out. I understand if we weren't monitoring, because my question would be, actually anyone in the possum control could simply be asked as part of the program to supply yearly their residual trap and show that they're complying. That would be a a relatively simple way, which has never been done.
We independently do that monitoring. We wouldn't rely on land owners to do that. We independently monitor numbers so we can be confident that we've got, robust data.
Okay, sorry, the point I'm making is you can only do small areas, you can't do every farm, but if every farm as part of the program was asked to provide that information, you would know across every farmer in the district what their yearly, anyway, I'm not actually trying to get into a fix. The point I'm trying to make is I don't really see clear evidence that there has been a huge increase in possums. We're under this control program ourselves. We're actually seeing less. So it may be area specific. That's one of my questions. Is this possibly a very single area problem? It could be around forestry. It could be around particular land blocks that aren't being used. There's a whole lot of questions for me around that. So I have some really big questions around the evidence for taking this to what I see as a really highly regulated outcome. And more for me, the issue is if we want to tie this to a biodiversity outcome, which I totally can support, again, I couldn't even look at that until I understood the cost implications. If you want to go out to farmers and say, we are going to pay for all your possum control through a biodiversity rate across the whole district, and we're going to do it all for you, you can help or work with you. That's very different to saying we're going to take over all your possum control and it's going to be 100% your cost. So for me, I don't see the evidence to start with that we're following the right line, and I don't see a clear enough understanding of the funding implications to be able to support it. Not that I don't want to see less possums, because it can sound like that. Yeah.
Can Ian, you just condensely tell us what information has come through the working group to inform them to be able to take the direction they've taken to get to the decision that we have in front of us today?
And look, this is one of the really unfortunate problems of bringing this to you fresh without that context. The bioworking party has had all of that information put in front of them as part of that decision-making, the cost-benefit analysis, the rates proposition. So all of that has been before them and exploring the policy change and the recommendation like is in the paper is that on balance, looking at that and listening to the submissions, this is the right approach to take. So it's difficult for you because you haven't had access to that context. So look, I can't offer you any more than that.
And I'll just pass it to Councillor Lambert because he's been on the working party, and then I'll go to you, Councillor McIntosh.
Yeah, can I just say that there were a lot of moving parts to this before it came here to the working party, and one of them was about the cost was a biggie, so who's going to pay for it? And it was then when it was discussed and approved that we switched the point now was that we're talking about biodiversity and not possum control. So therefore, who's rather than, because before it was the farmers who were responsible and had the brunt of the costs. But after that initial discussion, it decided that biodiversity is everyone's interest, everyone's a winner, so therefore the roles were reversed and the costs were put out for the general population as opposed to just farmers. So now that actually for us, that took a cost off the farmers, so they no longer had to worry about it. The fact that we're also going to do the eradication ourselves meant that they can also concentrate on other parts of their farms. Obviously, one of their concerns was that they didn't want outsiders onto their property. So that is actually going to be, at the end of the day, that's on them. And we were hoping to try and sort that out as we move forward. And I guess push comes to shove, there might be an exemption that it probably doesn't get done. But that was something to be worked through. So yeah. The other one is that there are everybody of course wanted mustelids, deer, goats chucked in the mix too. But the reality is that we couldn't afford to do all that straight away. The biggest threat to our country right now is possums. Biggest threat to our biodiversity is possums. And it can be done on scale. That's what that's what put in front of us, and we believe that it can be done on scale to get it all done. The regional council does not have a track record about keeping an eye on people who are doing it and who aren't. That was pretty clear that there were a lot of people out there that weren't doing it properly. And there were some that were doing it really, really good. But the fact is that there's probably more ups for those people than there are negatives, just by moving ahead and having the whole area under possible control. So, and the other one, I guess, the biggest loser out of all of this is the contractors, because there mightn't be enough contracts to go around in the bigger scheme of things. And some contractors, I mean, the possum industry created contractors. Now that's going to be taken over by the regional council. It is going to be a bit of a problem for some contractors. I mean, our organisation, we actually initiated a contracting service, and I can see that our guys are just going to have to compete for work or go somewhere else. Or we then, maybe we move into the mustelids and the goats and the deer. Or we go and work for Kiwi too, because they're the ones who are being tasked with the job for looking after the deer until such time as the rest of us catch up. So the fact that the hybrid model didn't make it is unfortunate for a few people only. This is not a huge number we're talking here. And if we can make an exemption, then they probably will. The main focus is on biodiversity itself. And that's the problem. The number one enemy is the possum. And it's on all of our interest to get it done. The government sort of jumped the gun and beat us to everything by having a predator-free New Zealand by 2050. So this is just doing our bit to try and keep up with the time frame. We can see big gains being made in mahia, for predator-free mahia, over here at kidnappers. Are we going to be able to keep up with it? Now the urban and populated areas are taking up the brunt of the costing now, as opposed to the other way around. This is the best for the majority, and that's why it was put up this way. So,
Thank you, Charlie.
Sure.
Kia ora. And just so that we keep on track and we can progress through this, if we can keep to more governance questions around the paper and what's in the paper. Ka pai, Jock, thank you.
Okay, for me, the biodiversity benefits of this are such that we got to find a way to make it happen. And taking on board the various points of view, I do take some comfort from your saying that although you are potentially getting the right to do what you have asked for, the implementation of that will retain flexibility to accommodate, I hope, a number of ERIS points. So my question is, in implementing that, do you have the intelligence to know that when you're going down Te Apiri Road in Waimarama, so whakapapa Te Apiri Road, do you know which farms you are needing to spend a lot of time on and which farms you don't need to worry about because they're doing a great job?
Mark might be able to help fill in the gaps. That's the intention of the additional monitoring that we're doing right now. So we've effectively doubled our monitoring budget for two reasons. One is so that we could find out where the problems were and lean on those people to say, sort it out now, because we don't want you to free ride council turning up and doing it in the future. And B, for us to kind of go, well, look, if we got to the point of saying we're running some regional scale contracts, where do we focus our efforts? Where are the hot spots? Where do they exist? So I can't tell you exactly where they are now, whether your road is one of them, but we would get that information from the monitoring that we're doing now to help inform that. Yeah.
So Chair, I would feel comfortable supporting it in that context.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Would you like to, are you moving the recommendations?
Yeah, does it require an amendment to?
Yeah, I've got one last question, I'm afraid, it certainly goes.
Okay, one last question.
I didn't realise Appendix 4 was there until just now, and thank you, Leanne, for supplying that yesterday and telling me you've done so in your email, which I just read. What it reveals, though, is some rather startling information, that if this were to be adopted, we'd be looking at a one-off 10% rate increase for, say, someone in Napier, and a 20% one-off, or 18 to 20% one-off rate increase for Central Hawke's Bay, etc. Am I right in assuming, though, that we are adopting the policy, not the funding of that policy?
Correct.
Correct.
So that is still a gate to go through?
Yes, it is.
Doesn't commit us in
No.
adopting this policy to doing that?
That's another stage of decision making.
I wanted to make sure.
Very much.
Could I just make a point of clarification, but what Charlie was saying and on the funding, so farmers right now spend money on either employing a contractor, doing the work themselves, either or, and purchasing the bait, which is subsidised from the pest rate, targeted pest rate anyway. So farmers wouldn't have to spend any of that, and it would obviously transfer to a rate instead. But it's the urban population where we're kind of spreading the load here that would pick up the increase, more so because they're not spending anything right now.
Yep. And so are you happy to second that?
I can second that if Jock's moved it.
Just a quick correction, I notice on para 9 it lists the members of the working party.
Yes.
It actually missed that Jacqueline Taylor, so I'm sure she was a member from
Okay.
the start.
Yep. Can we note that, please, Leanne, in the minutes? Thank you. So we have a mover and a seconder. Jock, would you like to briefly speak to moving?
No, look, I think it covered it with the comment to Ian before.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Foley?
Oh, look, I'd probably just stress that point that Ian alluded to in paragraph 2 around controlling possums being the most significant thing the council can do to protect and restore the region's biodiversity. So, you know, there's lots of things around this table we talk about, decide to apply funding and resources to, and frustratingly we don't kind of achieve what we want to achieve. But I think the evidence and the track record's there that when we control possums we get some pretty good results, and specifically in this case in biodiversity, which is one of our strategic pillars. So more than happy to second the recommendations.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Harding.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to make the point that in supporting this motion, I'm merely not standing in the way of further progress. That should not be taken as indication that I accept that another $3.5 million a year, majority of which should fall on urban ratepayers without further examination. And also that without further examination of legitimate opportunities for hybrid models or for recognition of landowners who do this stuff and love it. So, but I don't want to stand in the way of the work that's been done so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Van Beek.
Yeah, I'll be abstaining for the reason that possums is number one enemy when it comes to biosecurity. We all know that. I applaud that urban ratepayers now will actually will be able to assist us in this and assist the landowners. But I'm abstaining, and I want to make that known because I will keep a torch to the feet of our staff, making sure that they'll do everything in their power to find a way for those who are capable, willing to help us in this journey in eradicating possums, that they actually have the opportunity to do so themselves.
Any other speakers? Councillor Sears.
Yeah, well, I am going to support the paper as well, not because I'm particularly happy with it, but because to vote against something that's looking to reduce possums is really counterintuitive. But similar to Councillor Van Beek, I'm taking confidence that there is still much opportunity to design this to fit within farmers who are doing the work, and will need this to be modified to suit them.
Any other speakers? Okay,
I just wanted to thank the Working Party for doing that hard work on our behalf.
Thank you. All those who agree say aye. Aye. Those against, and one abstention. Thank you very much. Thank you for the robust discussion. We are heading to our seventh item, which is the council appointments to the Regional Planning Committee. So we do have one of the co-chairs here with us around the table. And just a reminder, this is a very important committee of council that is in partnership with our PSG representatives across Little Hair. So who would like to lead this discussion? Thank you, Desiree.
I think Gavin's going to join me too. Kia ora everyone. You'll remember that this paper is rolled on from the 16th of November, where you were asked to appoint councillor members to committees. I'll largely take it as read, but the recommendations in there are to appoint 9 members to the Regional Planning Committee, and you'll also need to choose the voting option for how to vote in the chair and deputy co-chair of the committee.
Fantastic. Thank you, Desi. Are there any questions regarding this paper? Any comments? There are none.
I move.
Well, we will look at 1, 2, and 3, and I'd like to propose in number 3, the 9 councillors being Councillor Roadley, Councillor Lambert, Councillor Van Beek, Councillor Williams, Councillor Ormsby, Councillor Harding, Councillor McIntosh, Councillor Hokianga, and Councillor Foley.
I'd be happy to second that.
Yep, you'll be happy to second that. Councillor Williams, would you like to speak? Any other speakers?
I think you missed me.
Okay, all those who agree say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. We will move into number 4. And I would like us to resolve for voting system B.
Move.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Williams. Anything to say from the floor? If not, all those agree say aye. Aye. Those against? Carried. So I'd like to call for nominations for the co-chair of the RPC.
Councillor Ormsby.
And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Sears. Would you like to speak to that?
I think it goes without saying that following convention in this case, having our chair appointed to the co-chair of this important committee is commensurate with your standing on this council and your mana in its own right. So
Thank you very much, Councillor Sears.
I concur.
Any other comment? All those who agree say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. Oh, yes, and I accept this. Thought I'd do that. And
Assume there were no other nominations.
And call for nominations for the deputy co-chair position. Call for nominations, yes.
Nominate Councillor Hokianga.
Thank you. And seconder, Councillor McIntosh. Would you like to speak to those?
Look, as often is the case, I borrow Councillor Williams' words, because he always puts things far more eloquently than I ever can do. I'll just say everything that Councillor Williams said about our chair equally applies to Councillor Hokianga.
Councillor McIntosh.
Yeah, I think Councillor Hokianga is extraordinarily well suited to the role.
And I better make sure that you accept Councillor Hokianga. Any other comments? All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Councillor Hokianga. Well done. Kia ora. And we still have a 5 and 6 to resolve. I'm happy to move those.
Happy to second those.
Thank you, Councillor Foley. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Kia ora, tēnā koutou. We will move on to item 8, the Napier Hastings Future Development Strategy Joint Committee. Now, who's in charge of this? Gavin, take us away, Gavin.
Yeah, so last month, Council endorsed, in principle at least, to set up a joint committee with Napier City Council, Hastings District Council and potentially PSGEs for oversight of developing a future development strategy for the Napier Hastings urban area. This paper presents more flesh on the bones of that and a terms of reference for setting up that joint committee. So what is in front of you today is terms of reference for your consideration, and if you're happy with it, you've also got the choice to select some members to appoint to that committee. I would say that similar papers are being presented to Hastings District Council tomorrow and Napier City Council meeting either next week or early in the new year. If you were to vary the terms of reference in any way, shape or form today, out of courtesy, we would need to make sure that both Napier City Council and Hastings District Council's decisions are in alignment with whatever amendments to the terms of reference you may do.
Thank you, you've answered
Thank
my
you.
question.
Yeah, perfect. Any further questions of Gavin? Yes, Councillor says.
Two questions. Would we need to make a decision or express our view on point 13 around the representation of Ngāti Kahungunu around the table? It's put there as a question or as a modified approach, so I'd like to know if we need to do anything with that today. It's the first question.
You could certainly discuss it. The way the draft terms of reference are presented to you today is that there is no seat at the table for Niki, Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated. But if you were minded to do so, then that would constitute an amendment to the terms of reference. It would need Napier City Council and Hastings District Council's thumbs up as well.
Okay, well, we can maybe discuss that afterwards. My second question is I'd like to understand more in the terms of reference about this committee's role in hearing submissions to any recommendations that it makes. I can't find it right now, sorry. Sorry?
6.1.6.
Thank you, 6.1.6. I'd just like to understand how that might impact on this council particularly. I'm having a little bit of conflict understanding how that joint committee can receive submissions, which really also will need to look at how it's going to impact directly on individual councils. So I'd like to understand why the committee would have that power and if we think that's appropriate or the best outcome for this council.
Probably similar to considering a subcommittee model, operating, hearing submissions on a plan change or even your biosecurity review, and then the findings of that being reported back up to the council. In this case, it's reporting back up to 3 councils. How can you front-end load a conversation about what the implications are for one or more of those 3 individual councils? Probably that operates at several levels. First one is at a technical advisory staffing level, to be eyes and ears conscious that this submitter has asked for X, and if it's granted, then there may be implications for a council's BAU or the way things are done differently in providing infrastructure. Another level, besides a technical advisory officer level, is the role of those 2, in this case, 2 councillor appointments to the joint committee. So they're wearing their, in this case, the regional council hat, representing the regional council's interests in the business of the joint committee. They'll be reporting back to councils on and off again over the next 12 months, kind of in a similar fashion to what's in play at the moment with the Clifton to Tongaroa Coastal Hazards Joint Committee.
And H-PUDs?
This is sort of a replacement for
Yes,
H-PUDs.
but that would have been a similar model where that is.
Yes, yeah, true.
Okay.
James?
This may or may not be helpful, but I think it's useful to contemplate that the giving effect to the FDS is done through the district and regional resource management planning. So the decisions to effectively sort of bind the council and implement it would still come through the kotahi plan to the extent it's required to, although predominantly the focus will be through the district plans for Hastings and Napier councils. I've got that correct, Gavin?
Yes.
So I guess the hard decisions, if you like, it's probably their way of describing it, but the hard end of the decisions in terms of translating the strategy into policies and rules will still come through the RPC and ultimately through council.
Thank you. Yes.
Certainly in practice, while it's a different piece of work, the people involved, the entities involved will have touch points along the way where kotahi or the district plan reviews and the future development strategy work streams all sort of have touch points along the way, the next 12, 18 months. They're not in complete isolation from one another.
Question? Yes, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I really wanted to address this in I guess, discussion of the report, but I think I've put the opportunity to staff. There will be a governance level to this committee, and there'll be a TAG, technical advisory group level to this committee. Not quite clear on the makeup of the TAG, but I'm reasonably clear on the proposed makeup of the governance level. To understand the context of the question, as I see it, transport is the linchpin of any spatial planning exercise. Spatial planning is a fundamental and principal element of successful transport planning, but then the transport resources unlock the potential of that spatial plan to work. We're going through an exercise at the moment at the very preliminary stage of developing our next regional land transport plan, and we're doing investment logic mapping, or whatever that might be called, to problem solve and think about where we want to take this region forward in transport terms and to serve what end. Then you end up with spatial planning is the answer to that question. Where are people going to live? Where are they going to work? And how are they going to get in between? Around our resource and other constraints and natural hazard risks, what have you. So my question is, would the staff have any view on the inclusion within the TAG, or a mandatory requirement in terms of reference that the TAG complies at least 2 members of the Regional Transport Committee Technical Advisory Group, and equally that we have governance representation from the Regional Transport Committee itself assured within that terms of reference, so that those 2 processes talk to each other over the next 2 years.
My understanding is that the TAG, Technical Advisory Group, is a title, but in terms of who constitutes that TAG, it's quite an as and when needed evolutionary kind of thing. So from set-up days, we might just have project manager, planning, infrastructure leads, but 6 months' time, the needs of the project take a twist and a turn, and we need to shoulder tap some extras. Already, I can say that TAG features the likes of Katrina Brunton, Group Manager of Policy and Regulation, which heads up the transport functions, so there's connectivity there. From the Hastings District Council, CAMP, for example, there's a chap by the name of Mark Clues, who's plugged into the RTC.
Yes, he was on the
Yep, exactly. So there's already some similar personalities, names popping up. Whether that needs to be formalised for the TAG.
Would you have any objection to that being formalised?
Probably not.
Is there any reason
naturally
why
there already is what I'm trying to just reassure you of. Yeah.
No, that's good. I'm just searching for any reason why we shouldn't do it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Curtin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question on paragraph 21 of the paper. I just wondered whether other project costs have been calculated and where they fit in terms of HBRC's budgets, please.
To be fair, the technical advisory group that loosely exists at the moment is still standing up a bit of a pencil work program, and also what extra bits of work we might need to develop for the next 12 to 18 months. So in terms of having actually confirmed or firmed size of extra resources or budget needs, we're not quite there yet, but there is a general agreement that whatever those needs of the project will be, the costs will be split equally 3 ways between the 3 councils.
So we haven't done any numbers about what this is going to cost?
Not entirely, no.
But budget's been developed. This is an unbudgeted expense that we are having to incur by consequence of national policy directive that has come subsequent to the development of the long-term plan. It's being accommodated within our broader statutory advocacy funding and policy and planning funding that we have, but it is stretching resources which are already heavily stretched by a consequence of both the expanded nature of the kotahi undertaking, the cost of which has continued to grow as we've been more participatory and inclusive in its development, and also the other national policy reform processes that are underway which we are having to engage in. So,
do we have any money put aside for HPADs?
No.
No, there's no budget.
No.
Not a specific budget for that, no. It's part of a bigger spot.
Yeah.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just my colleague will pick this up as well. The PSG contribution is, you've got representation there. Where is that money coming from? If there is PSG membership payments already, is there a meeting fee, etc., involved in that? Has that been worked through in terms of budget?
Right, but I recall the terms of reference setting out the remuneration. Yeah, it is there.
So really my question is,
8.2.
if a PSG member is currently remunerated through their membership of RPC, is there a link with RPC?
No, there is no link. This terms of reference sets up a couple of seats for each of the 3 PSGEs, and it's up to those PSGEs to appoint who they choose to appoint.
Yeah.
Quite independently of whoever is already appointed to the Regional Planning Committee.
Ms Hopkins.
Kia ora, thanks, Gavin. A couple of questions. I don't think have the PSGs been consulted on this first?
Many of those conversations were being led out of the Hastings District Council's camp by Dr. James Graham, like Petty's equivalent.
I just know from MTT's perspective. This is the first I've seen of it. But that's case pie. I mean, it's a good terms of reference. The one question I had for you was I saw there at paragraph 12.2 of the terms of reference that the partner councils have also appointed lead consultants already to assist with the preparation of the FDS. So my query there was, I feel that the tangata whenua reps, who are not yet appointed, but probably should have been consulted around the appointment of the consultants. I don't know what type of consultants specifically we're talking about here, but if we're looking to include tangata whenua values and aspirations, etc., that would have been good to include them.
Just to be clear, the consultants referred to there are Barker and Associates, and their role that the contract exists for is as project managers.
Oh, okay.
They're not
actually
offering up technical advice or anything at this point.
Okay, good, thanks.
Councillor Lambert.
I noticed that the classifies tier 1, 2 and 3 urban areas, and on the basis that urban tier 3 is 10,000 and above. Does that not include Tetra Hawke's Bay? Or? I know it probably just misses that. Well, it just misses out by a smidgen. Me and Petty are down here.
Is that what you're whispering about? Are there any other questions for the paper? Because we've got some recommendations. Councillor Thompson. Hokianga.
The answer to this probably lies in similar comments that James has made, Madam Chair, in relation to the kotahi plan and the emerging themes that would come from kotahi. But I think the principles underlying the application of the partnership, page 21, 1.3, the commitment to evidence-based research and mātauranga Māori being utilised in the development of the FDS, along with relevant previous work and thinking. I guess I'm going to imagine that that there's going to be some equity space in there. You know, we've come through the last couple of years of seeing across national headlines I guess the debate that between mātauranga Māori versus science and these types of things. And I just think at some stage we've got to grapple with that. We're talking about multiple worldviews here. And I think it's important to kind of seed the thinking here when we're talking about the multiple levels of collaboration. We've heard some of the triggers of the different committees, spatial, transport, and when we're coming to kotahi, the RPC, and then here. And so there's going to be some consistent, I guess, some consistent narratives associated to how the thinking is going to emerge. So I'd just place it there.
Got it. Any other questions or comments? There are none. If we can move to the recommendations that we do have, and to add in 4.3, appoints Councillor McIntosh and Councillor Sears as representatives, and then appoints Councillor Williams as the alternate. And then we move on to 5. And is there an additional recommendation to be made, Councillor Williams?
Yes, I was going to propose that we recommend an amendment to the terms of reference to our partner councils, whereby, and I don't know if Leanne may wish to be on this clause, 4.1 point 3, we put in a new 4.1.4 that would read, voting members of the Regional Transport Committee unless otherwise represented through the partner council representatives. So what that means is if Hastings District, Napier City and Hawke's Bay Regional Council have already put forward within their 2 members councillors who are on the Regional Transport Committee, there would be voting members from the Transport Committee directly put on there. So that's a proposed amendment that I would like to run past the other councils. Haven't?
Are you inferring 1 or 2, or 1 and 2?
I'm thinking 2, and so I guess it's more. I'm just trying to work within the language of it.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, it would actually be simpler just to say 4.1.4, Hawke's Bay Regional Transport Committee,
Yes.
and then to add to 4.2, the Hawke's Bay Regional Transport Committee shall be entitled to nominate or to appoint up to 2 representatives unless that committee is otherwise represented through the partner council representatives. Oh, that's starting to look really, really clumsy, I'm sorry, but I think you'll get the point.
Mm-hmm. I think that was fine how you said it.
All right.
Does everyone understand what that means? Is that the Hawke's Bay Regional Transport Committee have up to 2 opportunities to appoint if they're not already represented through the council?
Well summed up.
Do we all understand that?
If there are already 2 voting members of the Transport Committee on there, then it doesn't get any additional. Yeah.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair, I would just caution that could be seen as quite limiting because each of the TAs can only appoint 1 representative to the Regional Transport Committee. So that would mean that
Oh, they only get
that
one?
person would have to be on this joint committee as well. And then they would only have a choice of one other person.
Two of each?
Not onto the
But on the
On the
transport committee,
transport committee, there's only one representative of each LTA.
I don't think
But Martin-
is suggesting that each council needs to achieve two. It's saying that in the whole committee, there needs to be at least two representatives from the regional transport committee. Have I got you right, Martin?
That's exactly it.
And if it so happens that the collective council representatives, of which there are 6 proposed, cover those
Yeah, there's already,
one for two, then there's no need for an additional.
that's right.
The only thing I'd say about having an additional is you may upset then the co-governance balance,
And
which
that?
is achieved here.
I understand that.
Shouldn't be limiting.
Practice a robot, it's not a movie.
Draft that in.
Okay,
Providing
so
it one.
does your amendment still want to stand, councillor Williams, as up to 2?
Yes.
Do we have a seconder for that? Okay.
About cyclists, Sheriff should have said cyclists.
Do we have any comment around what is proposed?
And if that's not acceptable, just so that it's understood by the other councillors, they might consider that the Regional Transport Committee should have speaking but not voting rights
Yes.
at this committee's meeting. That's the fallback.
So just around the drafting of it, if you were so minded, it could be that the councils each give consideration to having one of the appointees being from the Transport Committee, as opposed to having an additional 2, potentially, so that you do keep the co-management numbers, the co-governance numbers the same. So you still keep it 50-50.
Could I propose that we have an afternoon tea break, 10 minutes?
Well, you sort of.
Come up with something a bit clearer?
It's going to be a long
Right,
afternoon.
so we can pause everything else except
yeah.
for that last recommendation. Is everyone okay with that? Halfway, awesome. Let's have a cup of tea break and come back in 10 minutes.
Why do you need 2?
I've been,
to read out your very well articulated sixth recommendation.
okay, well, it involves amending 4.2 to say approves the terms of reference bracket as amended. Or no, actually, you've done it, sorry, Leanne, a new 4.6 reads, amends the terms of reference as follows. Do you want to read that out, Leanne?
Proposes that the terms of reference is amended to include 4.14, 4.1.4,
Yeah.
Hawke's Bay Regional Transport Committee asterisks, and then under there asterisks, unless represented by one or more partner council elected persons appointed, bracket, excluding alternates,
Bracket.
close bracket.
So what that means is if the three councils between them put up one or more elected members who are voting members of the Transport Committee, the Hawke's Bay Regional Transport Committee is not separately represented. But if the three partner councils all appointed 6 people who had no voting members of the Transport Committee, they have to be represented by one, one or two, you understand? So amongst that 6, there must be one, or it has to be one or more. There could be 4. Understand? That's what I'm suggesting.
Any comment before we move on? Obviously, you're moving that, Martin.
So it's a guarantee that there is at least one voting member of the Transport Committee on that.
So can I just clarify, does that mean then that there won't be even numbers of?
It could well be.
Right, it could be 13.
It could be.
If the councils were dumb enough not to put between them someone who was a voting member of the Transport Committee.
That's the mayor. It's the mayor.
So do I have a seconder for that? Thank you. Any other comment? Right, all those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. We will move on to our information and performance monitoring section of the meeting. Can I please invite staff? Who have we got? Sarah. Kia ora, Sarah. Around our organisation performance report from July to September. We are running short of time, Sarah. So if you could give us a executive summary.
Totally.
And then we'll go into questions. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. I would have had my colleague Horiza Adelan, who's the new performance and data analyst, but she's had to go off because she's got to go and pick up a baby from childcare. So she's just recently joined the team, and this is her area of work. So apologies you didn't get to meet her. You'll see her at the next meeting. So this report's usually presented at the Corporate and Strategic Committee, but because we haven't had one this quarter, it's coming to the council. You've probably all seen it before, but for the new councillors, this is produced quarterly, and it has information about our level of service measures. It has sort of corporate metrics in there as well that we help make us decisions, and we have a summary of each activity that's in our long-term plan, a summary about what we've done in the quarter. And what I'd say is new for this quarter, we've actually included 7 of our corporate services. We've got a summary from each of the teams. So this includes ICT, people and capability, not strictly speaking the corporate services team, but they're part of the support services, finance and procurement, corporate support, communications and engagement, and the risk and audit, and also the strategy and governance, which is my team. You may recall seeing some annual work plans during your induction. They were put together at the beginning of the year, and these activity reports talk to those about what we plan to do during the year, and we're reporting against them. I must point out that the level of service measures are not in this report where they usually are for the quarter. The reason being is that we didn't have a corporate strategic committee to look them over, so we didn't collect them, but we provided everything else. However, at the next corporate and strategic committee, we'll have 6 months worth of information to share with you then.
This is the first quarterly report for the current year, which is the year 2 of the long-term plan. And we do have a dashboard, but I could go through a couple of pages, Chair, if you'd like to, but otherwise I can offer to sit down and go through any of the pages to help any of our new councillors navigate it.
Sure, that's a great idea. If you just want to pop one up for an example.
Can you press the button, Leanne?
Particularly for our new councillors. And then what I recommend is those who want to deep dive it, arrange a one-on-one time with someone in your team to do that. Yep. Is everyone happy with that?
Yes. Thank you, Chair.
That's not the right,
That's not you.
Well, that's the other half of me, yeah. That's usually on my second screen.
Do we know if all councillors have got a Power BI
This is what we're trying to show up.
bookmark already preloaded into their web browsers? Do you think they have?
Yeah, that's what, they have got the licenses and it should have been loaded on the, the pads.
I can confirm that it's not functional.
Oh, right.
Right, okay, that's good. All right, well then, yeah.
Yeah, I thought we'd line that up. That's good to know, and then we can sort that out. Okay, well, we can't see it, so I can't take you through it.
Sorry, can I just make just a few very quick comments in relation to the quarterly report? Draw council's attention to the quarterly turnover, which has trended down over the last couple of quarters. That's a good sign. That does reflect what we've seen by way of a reduction in resignations after that very, very high level of turnover in quarter 3 at the start of the calendar year. So we're certainly seeing our staffing situation stabilise. You will note in the activity reporting there is an orange traffic light in relation to environmental science, and that reflects the fact that, as the commentary says, our science team has been operating at 60% capacity with vacancies. I am advised that we have made some headway just in recent weeks, and there have been some appointments made to fill some of those vacancies in science at last. We still have some vacancies, but that situation is on an improving trend, and also just draw council's attention to the fact that the target around our the response of our customer experience call centre team has gone backwards. So we had started the year very positively, and the work we've done to build a more responsive system and capability for incoming calls, emails, etc., was really tested in this last quarter because of its timing with the rates invoices going out and a large number of calls coming through around MyWay. When we planned MyWay, we assumed that a much larger proportion of users would use the app. We are finding that a significant number of users don't have access to mobile phones and are requiring booking directly the service with our call centre. That plus disruptions to the bus network put a pretty heavy burden on the customer experience team during the quarter. So that remains a challenge, and will, I suspect, in future years be a bit peaky in that first quarter of each financial year, particularly when the rates invoices go out. But other than that, there should be no surprises for council in the reporting. There is an orange traffic light on water security and also on policy and planning, which just highlights that we do have some delivery risk potentially relating to water security, the consenting challenges that may lie ahead, and in policy and planning. Everything this table understands about the challenges we have with Kotata.
Thank you, James. Questions, Councillor Harding?
Thank you, Chair. Look, many questions I have as a newbie. There's lots of interesting graphs and data that begs as many questions as it provides answers. In the interest of time, one thing I do need to raise, it's the doubling from 3 to 6 of injury, illness and harm events in the past quarter, so we should inquire about that.
Absolutely.
I realise it's coming off a low base in the previous quarter, but is there anything we need to know about that?
So what we particularly look for in this area is our trends, and certainly since COVID began, and you can see with the resumption of activity post-COVID, because some of that data reflects the immediate post-COVID period when operations began. Certainly since we're talking about here the start of the previous financial year, there has been a lower level of injury and illness prior to our previous experience, and that demonstrated some of the gains we're getting out of our dedicated health and safety advisory team working more closely with business. So it's tracking still at that level. You'll see the 555,536. So there's nothing trend-wise that would indicate that we're going in the wrong direction, but we aspire to have no illness or injury on the job. We will typically report here if there is a serious incident, and we will come to council if there is one that we think warrants a significant change in approach or policy or something like that. So it's certainly something that the leadership team check in on weekly, and at this point in time we have no cause for concern that there's anything inordinate going on in relation to that number.
Thanks, James. And just adding to that, a question around, do we understand the relationship between a major injury or harm and the lack of possible training because of it?
So when there is a major incident, it is investigated by the health and safety and wellbeing team to understand what's occurred and what policies or procedures were followed or not followed. And these are all relatively minor. We haven't had a major injury or illness in recent times, so nothing to indicate. I mean, these will typically be things such as grazes, bee stings, those sorts of things that happen with the outdoor workforce. There has been nothing in recent times that suggests that there are issues with our policies and procedures.
Okay. Councillor McIntosh.
Chair, I'm unclear, page 5, on the objectives for on-demand transport. It notes there that whilst bus patronage had decreased, on-demand had a consistent increase, but that was not sustainable, at least without an additional vehicle. So on the one hand, if you had on-demand and not enough people were using it, that's no good. But we've erred on the side of too many people using it, and that also is not good. And so I'm just unsure as to what the objectives of that service were.
Katrina's just arrived. Difficult thing to throw to her immediately. Do you want to have a go at answering that, or would you like me to, Katrina? Catch your breath.
So what were the metrics that we proposed for on-demand trial in Hastings? Is that the question?
I think. Yeah. What was the purpose, I guess, of the on-demand trial, given that there is a question mark about its sustainability? So perhaps an explanation.
So we had, in particular in Hastings, the 3 routes that on-demand replaced. We had declining patronage and to some extent almost non-existent patronage for one of those lines. So the intent of the trial was quite simply to try and see if we could increase patronage. And I don't recall, and I could be wrong, but I don't recall there ever being a fixed metric about how much we could increase that. And so the commentary about that is we have reached capacity. So we have done that. We have increased patronage almost twofold on what we had on the fixed route buses. But it has been so successful that it has now got to the point where we either expand the service or
because the 3 vehicles that we have can't cope with the capacity that is wanting to use it. And so we are looking at, as we always were intending to, once the trial had been in operation for 2 years, look at what is the best option going forward. And with the numbers that we currently have using public transport in Hastings, it actually requires, or the best option is to put on some fixed lines again. But as our regional public transport plan has identified, not with loop services, but actually with more frequent two-way bus services that run more frequently. And so that's what we would be looking to implement once we pull back from on-demand trial in Hastings.
So at that point, though, the reason on-demand will have been successful, I'm sure, is because it is on-demand, and the frequency of it through being on-demand. And so in replacing that with what you're describing, you're taking out a number of the components that have made on-demand successful. And so it kind of doesn't work to me.
Not quite. So the proposal that we have detailed and had public submissions on in our regional public transport plan is about having fixed lines that are much more frequent. So they would be in operation both ways, so bi-directional, two-directional, every 20 minutes. So currently what we have is very long, drawn-out loop routes that if you're going one particular way, it might be a 5-minute trip, but coming back the other way might be a 25-minute trip or longer or thereabouts. And so, yes, part of the appeal of on-demand is that you dial it up and it comes to you where you want at a time that you want. We would be replacing that with a fixed route that, in essence, no matter where you go, you still have to go to a bus stop. So that takes away the where the bus coming to you, but it would be replacing it with a frequency that is no less responsive than the on-demand service. So you can wait up to 20 to 30 minutes for an on-demand service. We are proposing that you would only ever have to wait a maximum of 20 minutes for a fixed line service. Noting that we are not proposing to do this until 2025, or we would look at it if the on-demand service started to fail and not meet the requirements or the demand.
I think possibly the additional piece of context is the fact that on-demand is very expensive per passenger kilometre, and ideally from a customer experience point of view, you'd have on-demand for everyone, everywhere, but the more people use that, the more obviously you start getting into the efficiency alternative of running fixed routes again, because you're starting to get the volume to justify that, and it's far more cost effective. So there's a tipping point in all of this, which the trial was aimed at investigating. So we understood the passenger behavioural question and the willingness to pay, etc. But then there's going to now be an optimisation question back for council.
Okay, so on-demand was never a long-term goer. It was a trial because it was too expensive to be a long-term flyer.
Not necessarily. It could still have remained complementary for the wings, if you like, of a trunk network, and that still remains a possibility. It's just the optimisation of the whole system that needs to be worked through.
Can I just speak to a little bit of this? Very briefly, look, the thing is about moving, and Katrina's exactly right, we're doing things in parallel, 2025, etc. But the point that was made is we had a lot of people who have mobility challenges, who are less able, and who are not going to have a bus stop as close to them as a result of moving to a frequency rather than coverage model over the longer term. And we got a really strong pushback from people who will now have to walk further to the conventional bus service to get to a bus, saying, please keep on demand for all time. This will have to be, as a bit of adaptive management in here, something that has to be assessed in the next long-term plan context once we've got the results of Hastings and see how Napier goes. Are they adjuncts to each other, which would be my dream, or is on demand really just a circuit breaker to get people in Hawke's Bay thinking about getting on the bus, which will mean those other bus routes work really well regardless. But it's still a work in process, but they're not predatory on each other at all.
No, don't get me wrong, I love on demand. It seems fantastic. What I'm scared is that we've provided people with something they really want, they're demonstrating that, and then we're going to throw it away again.
That's a way better problem than
We're going into discussion here, and I think we can take this offline. So back to the performance report. Are there any specific questions while we have Sarah here, remembering that we can access her and her team and Katrina for the on-demand questions? Councillor Curtin.
Thank you. 2 questions. Just going to the HPRC website visits, I see that sort of taken a big jump. Do we know what sites are visiting? Is that related to the election cycle?
You're talking on page 10 of the report.
Page 10, yes.
Yeah. I think the Q4 was a glitch. It seemed too low for me, and we went back, but the digital comms team did go back to Google Analytics, is where they get the information from, and I think it was an anomaly rather than a dip in users as well, so or people visiting the website. So we couldn't get to the bottom of it because it went across both quarters and both social media and the website as well. So we can only present the data that we've got, but that's what I would note. But that's a good pickup.
Sure. The page 12, the carbon footprint for air travel. I see that's taken a big hike up. Who's going and where are they going?
I'll let the CEO answer that one. I thought you might pick it up.
Name and shame?
Look, it's considerably less than it used to be pre-COVID still, so we're not travelling as much as we once did, but what you're seeing is the gradual resumption of air travel. And if you look at the graph on that same page in the bottom left-hand side with the dark blue representing the air travel, you can see it just starting to trend up again. That reflects obviously the change to things like mask wearing and what have you, and conferences are the biggest driver for our staff for air travel. They're starting to happen again.
Yeah, well, I just point out that Giraffe is running cycling schools.
Any other questions? Yeah, Councillor Radley.
Through you, Chair. Just on the people and capability page, not a question, just a comment, the vacancies and recruitment box with the number of vacancies and the challenges around our scientific roles, and just noting that how key that is to our organisation, and is there something we can be actively doing in that space? So are we doing anything to encourage our scientists through the bottom?
Through you, Chair, yes, good question. What we've been doing is really trying to use things on LinkedIn a lot more to both promote the work, the science, so encouraging our current scientists to talk about their work on LinkedIn to try and generate an awareness and interest in council work. And look, since this report, as the Chief Executive had mentioned, we have secured a couple more scientists, so things are starting to settle off. But yeah, look, we're using every opportunity we can to kind of flag us as being an employer of preference.
And do we have an intern sort of?
Not a formal science intern program, but we certainly do bring people through from our more technical roles into science roles. We often have students who work for us over the summer who return and work for us full-time as scientists who come in at a very entry level. So nothing formal, but certainly an organic process around that.
Possibly that's an area we might need to focus on. And just secondly, I noticed along with Councillor Curtin, the communications and engagement report, that sitting alongside the website was a significant decline or trend in the social media interactions, and I just wondered if you'd like to talk about that.
Apart from the metrics that they're getting from Facebook, I think that was just a blip that was in Q4, but the downward trend, I think it is reliant on staff logging their inquiries and things as well, and maybe that's been dropping off a little bit. I can't see any decline in the amount of inquiries and media and items that are coming through, so I think that's probably more a reflection of how staff are reporting it. They're putting it onto a spreadsheet, so there's nothing really scientific about the data captured there.
Do we use other social medias other than the
Facebook.
We have yes, we've just started using TikTok. We've got.
You could run that before you leave.
Can I answer this one? Sorry, James.
Sure.
We use multiple platforms, and currently we collate the data manually just when there are inquiries and hits on our social media sites. So currently the team are seeking external contracts or a cost to see what we can get on media monitoring to outsource that, so that we can actually bring back sort of customer sentiment, consultation, engagement, success, and what that looks like, because at the moment it's very manual.
And do I understand we've got a new lesson started this week? Mike, would you like to introduce yourself?
Mike Johansson, new Director of Communications. 8th day on the job, my head's still spinning.
Be like that for a while, don't worry.
Yeah.
But we'll be looking for great things in that space.
If there are no other questions, but just to thank you, Sarah, to you and your team. Although this is just an informational item, it's quite important for us to keep a pulse on what's happening in the organisation, particularly with our people. So thank you very much. Can I please have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Harding, Councillor Fenbake. All those who agree, say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well done, team. So we do have the Treasury report up next.
Do you want me to give a
Yeah, could you just give
Yeah,
a brief summary, and then we'll take it as read and head into questions.
Yeah, really brief. So as at the end of September, HBRC remained compliant with all its Treasury policy measurements. You will note in the report, however, that we had a breach in our counterparty credit risk measure in September. Now, what that was we had excess cash that we had received in from all of our rates collection. We decided to put that on overnight cash facility where we got the best rate. Unfortunately, we triggered a counterparty credit measure where we can't hold more than 20 million with one counterparty. We breached that limit overnight for 5 days until we removed that out and split it to B and Z. So those thresholds, it was a bit of an own goal. Sorry, guys. Admittedly, the three of us relatively new to those limits. We've done that ourselves. So unintentional, but we sorted it out really quickly.
Any major consequences we should be aware of from that? Thank you.
At least it was you doing it and not the Russians.
Oh, bless. You will note in the summary of the PwC report, our returns are negative 1% for around that 1%. Now, please note that is actually better than the last 2 quarters. So in March we had negative 7%, June we had negative 5%. So we're getting back to balancing. So please don't see that as too much of a negativity. Certainly yesterday out of the US that CPI index has come out. There's positivity in the US, and Dow Jones yesterday had a brilliant day. So our international space and stocks is going really well. So I'm forever hopeful that we are going to have a really great result next quarter.
I'll just write that down.
Yeah. That in summary is where the Treasury report is at, just we remain compliant. Yes,
Councillor Harding, thank you.
Very quickly, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to compliment those who've been over time responsible for this report, just staying faithful and having an inflation-adjusted column for all of these funds, because it's very instructive of the challenge that we face with HBRIC to get real returns. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Susie? Councillor Curtin?
I'm happy to move the report.
Happy to move it. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Hokianga, any comment?
Just very briefly, the commentary on the counterparty credit exposure just raises the issue of the need to review policy, review the SIPO, and it's clear that we're not fit for purpose. We've got in this case cash. The best place for it was placed as cash, and yet we breached a covenant. So that just tells everyone that we need to move, make a much more flexible environment for our fund managers and for staff to work in. So
we need that review quickly.
Thank you. Any other comments? All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Thank you very much. We now move into our public excluded part of our meeting. Could I please have a mover and a seconder for us to move
So
into
moved.
public excluded? Councillor Van Beek and Councillor Sears. All those who agree say aye.
Aye.
Those against, thank you.